with that, I'll say good morning and welcome, everyone. This is Lorianne Wardy. I'm VP of Registry Services at Neustar, which is the parent company for .co. I was one of the co-founders of .co, which is the company behind the .co domain, and we were acquired by Neustar just over 2 years ago. When we first launched .co, we had a dream. We really wanted to change the fabric of the internet, and as a scrappy startup, we wanted .co to be the first credible competitor to .com, which to be really the domain for people with big ideas, you know, the dreamers, the doers, the movers and shakers, people who had something they wanted to say or do that would sort of change the world. And here we are, we're 6 years later, and we've become sort of the first choice in domains for startups and innovators and entrepreneurs worldwide. And when people asked us back in the beginning how we would know if we succeeded, we always would say that we wanted to see the world's next great startups make their home on .co, and we would know when these companies were able to take their idea from sort of the start, just idea stage to investment stage to traction and growth on our platform. And one of the very first companies that we ever saw do that is a company called CommonBond. And I'm really thrilled to be here today with David Klein, one of the co-founders of CommonBond, which launched nationally, I think, in 2013. Am I right about that?
That's right, yeah.
And this company really personified that dream that we had, which was taking the seed of an idea. I think when we met David, he had just graduated with his MBA, and he and his partners literally had the seed of an idea. They had no money yet. They had competitors who were in their space. They were scrappy, they were hungry, but they were driven by this big, juicy mission to do something great. And we invited David here today to tell you about what it took to go from idea to dream to idea to making it happen, raising money, and creating something that is potentially going to change the world. So welcome, David Klein.
Thank you, Lorianne.
Thank you for being here. And just for the record, David was traveling this week, so we squeezed this interview in without really having time to publicize it properly, but we wanted to get it on the record so that Techstars could promote it during Global Startup Week. So we won't have too many people in the room, but we're recording it for the future. So I guess the first question for you, David, is tell us a little bit about CommonBond. What is it? What do you do? What's the dream?
Sure. So CommonBond is an online lender, and we lower the cost of student debt in the U.S. We do that by using data and technology to better underwrite those with student debt to refinance them into a lower rate product. When we launched nationally towards the end of 2013, we launched with the mission to make education more accessible through more affordable finance, and that you could get in a simpler way. The idea itself came about from very personal experience. So I went back to business school back in 2011. I had to pay my way 100% with student loans, and I realized that rates were unnecessarily high, the process was unnecessarily complex, and the service was pretty poor. And I had gone back to business school with the express purpose of starting a company and running it before graduating. And so, and I also had, by the way, a background in finance and come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so all these things kind of converged at the same time. The personal pain I experienced in trying to get student loans to pay for school, decided to marry that up with my background in finance, entrepreneurial ambitions, and launch what ultimately became known as CommonBond. In business school, ended up writing the first business plan, met my two co-founders, Mike Taramina and Jessup Sheen, in business school as well. We continued working on the idea. Lorianne, we met you and the .co team very early on, to your point, before we were ever really truly seed funded or launched our pilot program. And a lot has happened since then. In that time, we've done close to $1 billion worth of loans funded.
Amazing.
We will save that group of people millions and millions of dollars in aggregate Individually, on average, we save them about $15,000 on their student loans over the life of their loan. And so, we're very excited about what we've been able to do. We're also very excited about where we're going as we continue to grow and scale the company.
So student loans have never traditionally been a very, I'd say, sexy area, right? But you guys have done something around this area that really seems to have changed the conversation around student loans. You've actually gone from, it seems to me that you've gone from just sort of helping people get student loans to almost creating a community of interest around student loans. How on earth did you do that?
Yep. And so it's a good question. Just for some of those who may be listening, just to describe the community aspect. Not only can folks come onto our platform and get a lower cost student loan and get it in a way that is simple and speedy in terms of process, but once folks get a loan or refinance a loan with us, they become a CommonBond member. And I used to work at American Express, where the old tagline was all about membership has its privileges, and we have that concept and notion here at CommonBond. CommonBond members are able to plug into a community of other individuals who can actually help them in personal and professional ways. So we have dinners, member dinners, all across the country every year. We have 20, 30 members at a time come to these dinners. And it's an opportunity for folks to interact. We've had people find other jobs or make career moves because of this community. We also have events here in New York City, which is where we're based. A good number of folks are here full-time. Some folks travel here. Some folks are here over the summer. And we have a series of events that we put on inside of the company, and we'll get 100, 150 people at a time who come and listen to the panels that we hold on everything from, moving from corporate law to companies, investing professionals and career opportunities, marketing opportunities, women in tech, women in entrepreneurship, a whole host of topics that are very interesting to our membership base. And then the third thing I'd say, and finally, to the extent any one of our members ever find themselves in economic hardship, whether because they lost a job or because they have unforeseen medical expenses, whatever it may be, we have a program called Common Bridge, where we help people, we help bridge people from economic hardship to a place where they are more kind of on their feet. And the way we do that is we help connect people to their next potential job. We help source interviews. We work with people, as I said, to land on their feet, and that's been a wildly successful program as well. So when you talk about community, there's a general philosophy around here that our members are in fact part of a community, but then there are also specific things that we do across borrower dinners, events and panels, and then our Common Bridge program that create a pretty strong social fabric inside the CommonBond family.
That's pretty beautiful, because it really makes your customers, this is a very human loan. I mean, it's kind of something that you don't think about. And actually what I really love is that I think from the perspective of .co, and again, that dream we had, when we started, we did something very similar with community. And in fact, I think we met your partner, Mike, at one of our first .co community dinners in New York. There were maybe 5 .co users there, and Mike was one of them. And I think that was, in like 2012, well before you guys started really booming. So it's kind of fun to see that concept of community really take off, and sort of part of our community is your community. So we love that you're in it.
And I remember that. I remember that distinctly. And I thought, here is an organization. You don't think of a URL extension to be an organization, but you guys very much were an organization, and you were a burgeoning startup, I think, at the time as well. And you were looking to build community. And I just remember thinking at the time, we had kind of found a soul sister in a sense, by way of company. Here's a company that was relatively early on, but was investing a lot in building a community. And that was something that we had done before we had our first member, before we had our first investor. We were actually building a community and holding community events, and that's exactly what you were doing. And I thought it was so great to find another company, and in this case, one that we were partnering with pretty meaningfully, who is doing the same thing.
Well, it's been wonderful for us to watch you guys grow and evolve on that. But so I'm sure you've had lots of challenges. What was one of the most unexpected challenges you guys have faced in these last couple of years building your business?
Sure. And I don't know if what I'm going to say is unique. I'm sure every entrepreneur can relate to anything I'm about to say by way of challenge. But the challenges, frankly, never stop. They change based on scale, but they're the same challenges that I'm sure, Lorianne, you've had to face, and many others watching this have had to face. Challenges around, getting the right number of people in the right place at the right time to deliver on your goals. There's never a straight line on hiring plan. There's never a straight line once you hire a team in development plan. And so it's constantly being able to understand what you need from a recruiting strategy perspective, but then understanding who your people are and what their needs are from a talent management perspective inside the company. And so I'd say that's one set of challenges that always presents itself to varying degrees as you scale.
I know that you guys have a real social mission and a social promise that you are intent on fulfilling. Tell us a little bit about, the importance of that in building this business, and, why you feel so strongly about it and what the promise here is for CommonBond.
Sure. So we have a one-for-one social mission, something we call our social promise, that is similar, frankly, to what Warby Parker has in eyewear, a one-for-one social mission. In our case, what that means is that for every degree funded on our loan platform here in the US, we fund the education of a child in need. And we've had that from day one. And we've partnered up with Pencils of Promise, which is an education nonprofit based here in New York, with a chain of over 300 schools globally to deliver on that social mission. To date, we have funded the education of thousands of children globally, have donated a material amount of money in order to back those scholarships. And it's something that we think is really important. We have, just generally speaking, a philosophy that, as we say internally, business can and should be a force for change, a force for good. And I personally believe that notion. I also really like the one-for-one model because it is realistic. It basically says that the better you do as a for-profit company, the more social good you can deliver. And that's how we wanted to structure it from the beginning, so that it was sustainable over time.
So how do you find, I suspect that it's probably one of your most important missions to find a team of people who have that same heart for what the work is that they do, and that they care about it that deeply. They're not here for just a paycheck or a job for their resume, but they actually are here to change the world. How do you find those people?
Yeah, it's a good question. The interesting thing is, we have this social promise, and we've had it from day one because we think it's the right thing to do, period, end of story. What we've also noticed along the way is that it's good for business too, both from a customer awareness perspective, right? Customers love the fact that they can save $15,000 on average by refinancing their loan with us, and in so doing, actually deliver social value globally. That's been helpful. The second way we've found it to be helpful is the premise of your question, and that is from a recruiting standpoint. I'd say of the people we have out here, 75% or more either heard of us because of our social promise or accepted the offer because, at least in part, because we have a social mission. And I think you hit it in your question. Folks want to be part of something greater than themselves. And while the core of what we do in lowering the cost of education finance is in itself mission-based work, the fact that we kind of go the extra step and the extra mile and drive social value globally as well with a one-for-one social mission, the first of its kind in finance, by the way, I think gets people excited, including myself.
So we have a lot of people who are going to be listening to this call who and this interview who are aspiring entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs who are participating in Global Startup Week. So for those folks who now they're at the dream stage, they're at the idea stage, they're early on, and they want to take their idea and get some investment behind it so that they can start moving it forward. Tell us a little bit about the process you went through and some advice you have, because I know you guys have been wildly successful on that front, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy thing to do. So if you could just speak to that a bit and try to extract some lessons learned so that our audience can take those on their own path.
Sure. I'd say keep going. Don't limit yourself psychologically. What we said in the very beginning, it was very easy to be discouraged in the beginning. We had law firm after law firm tell us that what we were trying to do was impossible. But that's because the law firm hadn't really seen anything like this happen at scale before. We had,
and I remember, I just want to interrupt for 1 second, because I remember when you guys first got started and we had just met at the time of that early on, at the time of our dinner. A year later or so, there was another company doing something very similar, and they got funding from someone else first. And I remember we were all like, oh no. And like the next day, you guys got back up and you went out, and then you sort of trumped that whole thing, and you guys went well beyond where they went. But I remember feeling like you could have just packed it up and said, well, somebody else got there first.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at any number of things, whether it's in the early days, law firms telling you, what you're trying to do, we don't have a box to put that in, whatever it is, there's a ton of resistance that you face as an entrepreneur and as a founding team in the early days. And I think the key is to keep going. Now, you don't want to block out the resistance. You actually want to hear a lot of it, because in that resistance, there is some feedback. How can you improve your model? How can you improve your approach? And that was something we were able to do as well. For example, I think we spoke to close to 200 people before we got our first yes on the investor side of the equation, right?
Wow.
Now, if we had said the exact same thing the 200th time as we said the first time, we would have never raised money. But with every conversation, we got a better sense of, what the model needed to look like. And once we got the model right, what the responses to any number of questions were or needed to be to move forward. And so there's this notion that you're gonna plow ahead. Don't let yourself kind of psychologically limit or prevent you from moving forward. You're going to face resistance. Take it as feedback. Internalize that feedback. Create a better model and a better approach for yourself, so that you can ultimately get to the point and raise that capital or hire that team, deliver those business metrics. What I used to tell, I remember Jessup and Mike in the early days was the only force that will get us off this path is if the market tells us there is no opportunity here, there is no market here, there is no product here. And what the market is the customers. And so we wanted and needed to just keep moving until we got to a place where we could breathe life into this idea, introduce it to the market, and have the actual market, the actual customers tell us whether they want it or need it or not. And when we launched our pilot, with a $2.5 million loan fund. And within 24 hours of launching our pilot, within the first 24 hours, we had 2.5 million of loan demand in our platform. And so the market had spoken. And we said, you know what, this is a big idea. The market has validated that in the face of resistance elsewhere. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep building. Let's grow.
That's amazing. 200 pitches. So just to that point, I think even that alone is something. If you could just speak to that a little more, how do you even get in front of 200 different potential investors to tell your story? What was that process like?
Sure. So for us, it starts with one. and you then go to 3, you then go to 10, you then go to 25. You're heavily
friends, family. Did you
leveraging network? In our case, we were at Wharton, so we were in business school. We plugged into networks of fellow classmates who came from a number of different investment shops. We plugged into the advice of the Wharton Venture Initiation Program, which is a educational incubator, startup incubator on campus. And so plugged into that network. And then we just, made that first, as I mentioned, made that first call. And then we always ask somebody after speaking to them, hey, now that you know a little bit more about us, is there anybody else that you would suggest we speak to? And I would say on average, we'd get 2 to 3 names at the end of every conversation. And so you tend to develop a much longer call list than you have time and resources to go after in the early days, if and when you do it right. And in our case, we spoke to a lot of individual investors, a lot of accredited individual investors, in addition to some early stage and seed stage investment funds.
Did you ever use a platform of the nature of AngelList or anything of that crowdsourcing?
Not really leverage those platforms. Remember, this was 2011, 2012. And so the notion of crowdfunding has matured greatly since then.
It's pretty amazing in the worlds we live in how whole worlds change in just 2-3 years.
Oh yeah,
it's funny to say that was early days of the internet.
That's 4+ years ago. If we were starting today, we would absolutely be leveraging the crowdfunding platforms for-profit companies. At the time, I think Kickstarter and Indiegogo was really all that you had kind of in the market at scale. But now we would certainly use that as a platform too. You want to, as an entrepreneur, you're looking to maximize the likelihood of success, and to maximize the likelihood of success, you're looking for any number of different channels that can hit for you. And I think online crowdfunding is one of those channels that can hit.
So what's the one thing that you know now, after these several years that you've been in business and you've grown such a booming, successful business, that you wish you could go back and in time and tell the startup version of yourself, a little tip, insider scoop? What would that be?
Relax.
Yeah.
There is a certain intensity to what all of us do. Everybody listening, building a company, there's a certain intensity to what we do. And when I say relax, I don't mean stop that intensity. I think that intensity, that energy, that lean forward nature is critically important to keep moving, to keep building momentum for yourself and your team, and then to keep that momentum going. And so I'm not referring to reduce that intensity, keep that intensity high. But for your own sake, just know that if you do keep intensity high, if you are putting in the hours, if you are putting in the team and process in place, and you're making good strategic calls, let that play out. There's plenty for you to worry about and be anxious about. Focus your energy more on just getting those things right.
All right. So now that I think we're winding up the questions, I guess my last question for you would be, do you have any sort of top tips besides relax and keep going that you would want to share with this pool of probably hundreds of, hopefully thousands of entrepreneurs who are going through Global Startup Week?
Sure. If I think about the early days, one of the things that was a struggle, and over time and having the conversations that I have, I think is a struggle for anyone in the early stages of starting a company, is to know, as mentioned before, there is so much resistance that you get. If you weren't getting resistance, then a million other people would have done it already, and what you're doing isn't too disruptive, right? And so by definition, if you're doing something worthwhile, you're going to face resistance. And so in that context, the question becomes, at what point do you not keep going anymore? Is there a point at which you just stop what you're doing and move and go into a different direction? And the question that arises a lot is, how do you know? How do you know when to go in a different direction versus to keep going? And what I would say there, in addition to what I've already said around just listen to resistance as feedback and appropriately tweak, model, or approach, what I would say is set milestones for yourself. Whether that milestone is to hire X number of people by Y date, or that milestone is to raise X number of dollars by date Z. Set milestones for yourself and go after that milestone. If you hit that milestone, then you've proven to yourself and others that you're building the appropriate momentum and you can keep going. If you don't hit the milestones, and that happens too, by the way, if you don't hit the milestones, it simply acts as a time for you to take a step back and just evaluate where you are. And in that analysis, you will find, or you will uncover, what you could have done differently to hit that particular milestone, such that going forward, you're going at it in a way that is better. And over time, if you keep missing milestones, you know, at that point, over time, you might have to have some really serious conversations with yourself around why it consistently isn't working, and figure out what to tweak at that point. And so, you know, you'll see from what I'm saying, I haven't yet said stop, right? In fact, you probably won't ever hear me say stop. What you will have me say is have a marker for yourself to take a step back and reflect, and improve your model or your approach.
I think that's great advice. I think it's sometimes so hard to know, you know, this word, nobody wants to be a quitter. No one ever wants to quit. But sometimes, you know, there's strategic reasons where there's a time and a place, and you don't want to do it too quickly without really being reflective along the way. Because had you guys quit based on some of the evidence you had gotten early along the way, look at the opportunity you would have missed out on and the world would have missed out on. So this sort of being reflective along the way is a really important piece of advice. And one of the questions that we got from the Techstars team is they were curious to know, I know you have an entrepreneurial family, but what were you doing before CommonBond?
Yep. So while I come from an entrepreneurial family, I was a corporate guy, and that was by design. I remember after graduating college and spending a year teaching English abroad, I remember coming back to the States and wanting to put myself inside of corporate America for about 5 to 10 years. And I had spent 9 years in corporate America, first at McKinsey, advising financial services clients, spent a number of years there, and then moved to American Express and spent time in consumer finance, and was there for a bit. And after spending about 9 years in corporate America, and by the way, I appreciate all of the years that I spent in corporate America, even though with every year I spent in there, I couldn't wait to no longer be in corporate America and go start my own, which is something that I had wanted to do from a very early age. But I thought, for me anyway, if I could put myself in a position to learn what great business looks like at scale, and to meet some incredible people along the way who are incredibly smart and effective at what they do, then through osmosis, if nothing else, I would take away some of that magic, if you will, and be able to apply it to starting a company and running it at scale myself. And so I wouldn't have given up my time at McKinsey or American Express for anything. I think it's you know, been great preparation for starting CommonBond, both from a strategic approach level as well as an executional kind of quotient level, right? The ability to figure out the right thing to do, but then the ability to get it done consistently and well over time. And that's, you know, that's the culture that we've created here. And that's the other thing that I pulled away from my experience over there is I've seen what, you know, great companies and great cultures inside of great companies look like. And I think that's, you know, a top 3 reason why companies win long term. actually has nothing to do with the sector that they're in, or even frankly the product that they offer. It has to do with the people they bring on board and the culture that those people plug into to self-govern and operate over time and at scale.
That's great. That's great advice, because I think it's probably fair to say that in many startups, there are teams that have never sort of been inside of the bigger companies, or the companies that have sort of created something massive and then scaled it. So it's great to kind of reverse engineer or be able to reverse engineer that. But David, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're very busy. I know you're getting ready to travel. And I think this interview will be very helpful to lots of aspiring entrepreneurs. And we thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lorianne.
Best of luck to CommonBond.
Thank you.